All right, hi everybody. It's 10 o'clock. I'm hopeful everybody can hear me right now. Let me put on my screen here just to briefly introduce myself. Hi, I'm John Bailey. I'm the interim director up here at the Hopland Research and Extension Center. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we'll be going through an hour-long presentation about the fire that happened here at Hopland and the research opportunity that we believe this provides. This is a photo of the fire the night it happened, taken from across the valley. The center is right down below that wave of flames, our main headquarters, and this is a fire that's burning down through the property. This was the night of July 27th, which is a little bit over a month ago now, and it was quite an exciting night. So I'm going to start by going over the agenda that we've got for the meeting here. So starting here at 10, we'll go through the agenda and the House rules, and then I'm going to go through an overview of what the Hopland Research and Extension Center is for those of you who are not familiar with us. Then we'll be going into some of the historical projects and the long-term data that's available, which could help you in your research here by providing the pre-fire picture. Then we'll go into a visual tour of what actually happened in the fire and what the center looks like currently. Then talk about what post-fire research opportunities there are based on our assessment of the land and also interest from researchers that we've already spoken with. And then we'll look specifically at how the Research and Extension Center can support your research and how to begin research here. And then we'll have a session of Q&A. So it's a slightly modified agenda from what we emailed out, but everything is the same. The order is just switched. So House rules are just make sure you're on mute. We'll have a chance at the end for questions. So anytime you have questions during this, please type them into your chat box. And we have Hannah Bird, our community education specialist, on the other end as a moderator, and she'll be tracking these questions for us to bring up in the Q&A session. And this is being recorded, and we have the link down here at the bottom so that anyone who is not able to participate can view this later. And also, if you have any colleagues that you realize in the course of this presentation that they might be interested in this opportunity, please share with them that link. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Research and Extension Center, we are there are 9 of us spread across the state. We're all part of UCANR, which is a Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Hopland is, you'll see just up above Davis and to the west. We're in the Mayacamas Mountain Range on the part of the coastal range. We're about a 2.5 hour drive from both Davis and Berkeley. And then for those of you who are more remote, there are daily direct flights from Los Angeles and San Diego, also from Portland and Seattle to Santa Rosa, which is about 45 minutes from HREC here. HREC is the Hopland Research and Extension Center. So it's fairly accessible. This is a map of the center overall. You'll see down at the so this is oriented north-south, south being at the bottom. And in the very bottom left-hand corner, you'll see we have a small area of irrigated pasture land and a vineyard there. Then progressing north, you go up over a rise. Then there's a very dark patch of forest there. That's a big madrone forest. So I just want to point that out as a reference location, because in some of the photographs, you'll be looking back at that and that will help orient you. And just a little bit to the north is a valley where headquarters is located. Then we progress upslope. So our lowest elevation is about 300 feet, 500 feet, and we progress up to 3,000 feet at the top. So from the headquarters area up to the top of the screen is all an incline. We move up from grazed pasture rangeland into more oak woodland, and then up at the top there's chaparral and chamise. The white is our road network, the white lines. The red lines are pasture boundaries, and the red text is the name of the pastures. So this is a historic photo taken at HREC in 1963 by Ansel Adams, and it's a site that's been owned since 1951 by the UC, operated as a research center. So there's almost 70 years of data from up to about 1,500 research projects that have been conducted here, which gives us a great background. I think that's part of the opportunity that we have here, is that we've now had a wildfire occur on this very diverse landscape, with all kinds of different treatments and surveys and transects having been done over the years. So there's a wonderful historic background and data set, and a large group of researchers who have worked here over the years, who have said that they are willing to share their information about the site, which is fairly unique when it comes to fire research. So now I'm going to go through some of the pictures of the center, and we'll be starting mostly down in the headquarters area and then moving up, looking at some spots. And I'm going to give a really brief description of each one of these photos, but mostly I'm going to be reading a quote from Dr. Adina Marylander about the Hopland Research and Extension Center. So this first shot is looking down at our headquarters area. You'll see that dark green wall of madrone trees that I referenced here on the right-hand side of the photo. And then our lambing barn is that largest structure, and the headquarters heads on down the valley there. None of this was burned. So the quote is, HREC's natural resources stand out for the diversity and abundance of species found across the center. Nestled in the North Coast ranges, with elevations ranging from 500 to 3,000 feet in elevation, the 5,300-acre center supports several vegetation types, including grassland, woodland, hardwood forest, chaparral, and a variety of wetlands, including intermittent tributary streams, vernal pools, springs, and seeps. So I'm going to pause in the quote now. Now we're looking back down from higher up on the center. You can still see in the middle foreground the wall of madrone trees. So we're kind of looking back towards the west, down through some of the oak woodlands and grassland that we have. This is now looking up the site towards where the last photo was taken from. You can see the oak woodland and grassland progressing up into the chaparral and chemise up at the higher elevations. So to continue with the quote, nowhere else in California can you see 12 oak species on a short stroll. HREC is also blessed with 12 vernal pools and a natural lake, shown here, rare ecosystems in the North Coast. As a result of this varied topography and associated habitat types, HREC's biodiversity includes up to 700 vascular plant taxa, 75 bryophytes, and 113 lichens. And the vertebrate list totals 200 birds, 40 mammals, 27 reptiles and amphibians, and 8 fish, including steelhead trout that occupy Parsons Creek, a tributary to the Russian River. And that creek runs through our headquarters area. So this is one of our vernal pools high up on the site. This is our largest vernal pool. And then we have a good handful of other ones at different elevations. This is obviously pre-fire. This is up at the top of the center looking to the south. So here we are at about 3,000 feet elevation. And this is pre-fire. So this is what that same shot looks like now. It was pretty intense fire up there. We did have a variety of fire intensities across the site, which I'll show you more about later. This is the quote from Adina. I'm not going to go into reading it again, but in case you just wanted to take a quick look. What we're going to do now is move into talking about the HREC past areas of study and research highlights. And I'd like to introduce Allison Smith. She's our principal ag tech here on site, and she's going to provide some of this background in the research here.
Thanks, John. I'd like to first highlight the areas of study that we have here at HREC. As a working sheep ranch, the majority of HREC's animal studies have focused on sheep, grazing studies, nutrition, parasitology, meat and wool production, range management, sustainable ranching practices, and breeding. HREC has had multiple long-term studies of ticks and tick-borne diseases and their vectors, as well as mosquitoes and lizard malaria. There have also been studies on various livestock parasites and the efficacy of different anthelmintics. HREC has had many years of fire research using prescribed burns, both in grassland and chaparral. This is the first time we'll be able to study wildfire effects on our center. The field of plant science, agronomy, and ecology is wide and varied and has had numerous studies in all of our habitats. Oaks and oak woodlands have been studied here in different capacities, from genetics to regeneration. Grassland and range management studies encompass everything from invasive weeds to forage production and soil fertility. Chaparral studies have given researchers the opportunity to study bird populations, wildlife habitats, fire behavior, mineral content, and nitrogen fixation. Additionally, there have been research vineyards, irrigated pastures, and various orchard studies done here over the past 60 years. As a major sheep research facility on the West Coast, many of our studies have involved different aspects of range management, from seeding and fertilization to grazing practices and invasive and native grasses. There have been extensive and detailed soil surveys done of the entire HREC property. This facilitates ease of study and specific site locations for studies on soil microbes, nutrient cycling, nutrient manipulations, soil erosion, and nutrient uptake and sequestration. Starting in the 1960s and continuing through to the present, HREC has had many studies using two main watersheds that have been experimental sites for watershed study. Both areas were cleared of vegetation and burned, creating very specific conditions for the study of hydrology on rangeland, and also for the observation of watershed restoration. There have also been several flumes installed in various watersheds across the property. The diversity of mammals, birds, insects, and habitats have provided a unique opportunity for the long history of studying rodents and small mammals, Columbian black-tailed deer, and coyotes. Presently, there are ongoing studies on wildlife ecology and human-wildlife interactions. Given the depth and scope of our landscape here at HREC, many of our larger projects have given researchers the opportunity to collaborate with those from other fields. For instance, our watersheds provide data useful in studies of hydrology, soil science, rangeland management, and oak restoration. Livestock on the landscape provides data in rangeland management, soil erosion, wildlife interactions, soil fertility, fire behavior, and more. Our recent wildfire gives the research community a setting for studies and collecting data sets in almost every discipline. Let's move on to some of our past research highlights that we have here. This is by no means a complete list of researchers or topics. It's only meant to highlight a few general topics and primary authors. I believe Hannah will post a link to our complete annotated bibliography up through 2001 down in our chat section. HREC maintains a 66-year data set of forage production, taken from 6 grazed pastures spread throughout the center. We also have a 66-year set of rainfall data from 1952 to the present. Additionally, we host a remote access weather station run by BLM at the upper elevation of our center, as well as a collection station for the National Atmospheric Deposition Program, which was set up in the 1980s. Bob Lane and other medical entomologists and epidemiologists have been studying ticks and tick-borne diseases here since the 1970s. Most notably, his work here with Willy Bergdorfer in the 1980s resulted in the isolation and identification of the spirochete Borrelia burgdorferi in Northern California tick populations. In 1992, Joe McBride planted a blue oak common garden, which Cal Fire was able to save at the last minute during the river fire, and is still standing now as phenotype data is currently being gathered from those oaks. In 1958, Kenneth Gowans and his team of researchers took samples from the entire property and produced the extensive soil map we have today. HREC has had historical and current research on nitrogen fixation, carbon sequestration, and other nutrient cycling studies. Currently, Valerie Evener has projects on seed density and nitrogen supplementation in grasslands. There have been thorough vegetation surveys and recorded transects performed here over the years, which have yielded over 700 vascular plant species recorded from our site, many of which can be found in our herbarium. More recently, Mary Firestone and the Firestone Lab have active projects looking at drought effects on soil microecology and the fate of root carbon. And Truman Young has a 10-year study on native grasses and their response to weather patterns. HREC has historically been at the forefront of sheep research, including Martin Daly's work on artificial insemination in sheep, numerous studies on sheep nutrition and rate of gain, and to this day, grazing and range management studies conducted by Yufeng Jin, Elise Gornish, and Travis Bean. In addition to our annual shearing school and wool classing school, a large amount of research was done at HREC on wool quality and experimenting with different breed crosses to create a strong, good quality wool that would stand up in our range conditions. Starting in the 1970s, Bob Tim and HREC began to study coyotes and coyote behavior. Dale McCullough, Ben Sachs, and Guy Connolly continued to study various aspects of predation, behavior, and diet in coyotes and in deer populations. Today, Justin Brashears and the Brashears Lab, in conjunction with CDFW, are conducting a large-scale population dynamics study of the wildlife here at HREC. In the 1990s, Donna Gillette did a survey of archaeological and historic sites around the property and focused her research on a series of boulders with pecked curvilinear nucleated shapes and forms, indicating that Native peoples have inhabited this area at different times over the last 6,000 years. Let's move on to fire-relevant research that has been conducted here at Hopland. This research was done exclusively with prescribed burns. We haven't had a chance to do wildfire burns until now. Chaparral burns and the ecological responses using different treatments. Starting with Alfred Murphy in the 1960s and 70s, then Scott Stevens, Jennifer Potts, and Kate Wilkin in the 1990s and 2000s, many prescribed chaparral burns were done over the years. To date, the longest data set here involves the Scott Stevens chaparral plots comparing mastication and prescribed fire. Brush burning and wildlife responses. Bill Longhurst and Guy Connolly in the 1960s and 70s worked on studies of mammal and bird responses to brush burning and multiple deer studies regarding deer habitat and population after prescribed burns, while Erica Newman continued collecting data with a look at bird populations in the post-fire chaparral in the 2000s. Fire effects on invasive weeds. Earlier studies in the 1960s with Alfred Murphy and Jack Major were primarily focused on Medusa head, while Joe DiTomaso's studies with Carrie Heisey, Adina Marylander, and Amy Peters in the 1990s focused on using fire to control barbed goatgrass. Oak survivability and regeneration. While John Menke and Alfred Murphy in the 1970s looked at broader scale effects of fire and grazing on oak woodlands, Barbara Allen Diaz and James Bartolome in the 1980s and 90s were specifically interested in blue oak regeneration. Watershed management and hydrology. In the 1960s, initial watershed studies were done with Robert Burgee in watersheds 1 and 2, where trees and brush were removed and flood effects and grassland improvement were monitored. In the 1990s, Ken Tate and Randy Dahlgren studied watershed management and water quality post-fire. Rangeland management, livestock behavior, diet, and grazing responses to fire. These projects were many and varied and included long-standing studies on sheep diet selectivity, mineral concentrations in deer diets by William Longhurst in the 1970s, and then Juliet Zavon in the 1980s and John Menke in the 1990s began studying plant population dynamic shifts in rangeland post-fire, grazing effects on fire, and the use of fire to convert brush to grasslands. While the earlier studies by Milton Jones in the 1980s looked at soil fertility when using fire to convert brush to grassland, the later studies by Rosa Canals, Valerie Evener, Mary Firestone, and Sarah Placella in the 2000s delved more into the plant-soil interactions and the effects on the rhizosphere, including carbon dioxide and nitrogen cycling. John?
Thank you, Allison, for that summary. That was great. As you can see, there's a great depth of history here of research. And I think that this makes it a very unique opportunity. It's really kind of once in a lifetime. We have this pre-fire data set that's extensive, broad, and deep, available to compare now that we've had a fire to what happens afterwards. This is important for our research to adapt our landscape management practices to the changing realities of our changing climate and also the extended fire season. So I feel like we're really at this critical juncture right now where we have this great opportunity we're inviting you to take advantage of. There's a lot of literature out there around prescribed fire, but this is an example of a wildfire that was unanticipated. Right now we have this post-fire pre-rain observation period that we're trying to take the best advantage of. We're going to be doing a extensive 3D high-resolution drone mapping project to provide a good snapshot, but there's so many different treatments that we have here. With our sheep flock, we've got areas that have been grazed extensively recently, like the area on the left of this image where you can see that the fire behavior was much different. The trees are all green and unburnt. On the right-hand side, that's been ungrazed for years. You can see the dramatic difference here. This is just an example of one of the divergences in our management practices that are you're able to study. In addition, one of the other things that happened here is we did 3 prescribed fire burns this year in early June with CAL FIRE. And so we have also the unique opportunity to study the effects of prescribed burns versus wildfire burns on the same property in the same year. One of those prescribed burns was then burnt over by wildfire. So we have a chance to examine how effective prescribed burns were in reducing the spread of the fire or changing the fire behavior. We also have biological reserves on the property that have been ungrazed since the 1950s. So there's a full range of possibilities of different landscape management practices available, along with the research that has been conducted here over the years. And with the diversity of ecosystems that we have, everything from riparian areas and a salmon spawning stream all the way up to chaparral, gives a really wide range of being able to study ecosystem interactions in a variety of ecosystems. One of the things that we have here is a limited amount of staff time. And so what we're really trying to encourage with this meeting is to encourage you to think about coming out here to the site this fall. We're waiving our site access fees because we want to bring people on the site and be able to allow you to do your first set of observations before the rains come. So what I'm going to do now is move into a virtual tour with a drone. Thank you very much to Shane Fire and Maggie Kelly of IGIS for helping us take these. So hopefully now you are seeing my screen, which is a drone image where Shane lifted the drone 200 feet off the ground and then took a 360-degree shot of the property. So we've got a few of these to go through. I'm starting we're looking south. You'll see in the middle ground here, I think you can see my cursor. My understanding is you can. I'm pointing at our irrigated pasture land and vineyard area. You can see in the surroundings, we're in an area that's dominated in the valleys by vineyards and then moves up into the oak woodlands. One of the values of these RECs is that we have the long-term ability to protect research plots and that that it's not going to change. You look at the landscape around us, it's moved from pears to hops to prunes to grapes. These RECs allow us the opportunity to protect a landscape in a certain condition for long-term research. So just want to point that out. So now I'm going to swivel the screen around to look to the east here. So you can see the Mayakamas that we're a part of. And now I'm scrolling, you can see where the river fire came across the property. We had about 3,000 of our 5,300 acres burn. And you can see here, pretty much all you're looking at that's burnt is the upper elevations of the REC. And then down in the foreground, you see the headquarters spread out. And then in the lower left-hand corner of my screen, that's that green forest of madrones that I mentioned earlier. So you can see on the REC, we've got, first of all, thank you, CAL FIRE, for protecting the center. In some places, the fire got within about a quarter of a mile from our buildings, but CAL FIRE got a bulldozer line in, which was great. And Then let's see, I'm going to move to this next one. So now we are looking back across at where the last photo was taken from at the top of that wall of madrones, looking at the headquarters here. And now we're looking, I'm going to swing us around to the west and then bring us up again to look at the property. So you can see where the fire cut across. You know, we've in the foreground, that looping circle is us feeding the sheep grain at this time of year to get them ready for breeding. And you know, we have grazed pastures right above this that were burnt, and then a grazed pasture that wasn't burnt. So another, you know, another example of a great contrast that you have to be able to do studies on. And now I'm going to move further upslope. So now we're about halfway up the property. You can see the variety of how much the oaks burnt. You know, the fire varied in intensity quite dramatically. I'm going to swing us around to, let's see, actually first I'm going to go down. So now we're looking straight down. In the foreground where there's the yellow grass, that's a pasture that was grazed heavily right before the fire. Actually, we moved the sheep out of there the day of the fire. And you can see the dramatic difference in how the fire behaved on the grazed land versus the ungrazed. You know, the fire behavior skipped around over the lower vegetation, barely burnt in some areas, and most of the oak trees in this green pasture remain unburnt. So we have a great chance to compare grazing practices, which is something that I think is going to become more important as we move into this future of an extended fire season in California. Now I'm swinging around to look upslope, and you can see, you know, we definitely had stronger flames in different areas. Up at the top where it's mostly pure black, that's chaparral and chamise. Also in the foreground, you'll see there are some white ash piles. Those are where oak trees burnt. In some cases, it took them up to a month to burn after the fire came through. Now I'm shifting up to the upper elevations. This is taken from almost at the top of the property. There was a vernal pool that we showed earlier on. This is that vernal pool now. You can still see that researcher's fence across the vernal pool. This canyon that is bright green is Morrison Canyon. It's mostly on our property. And so you can see how dramatic the changes are across this landscape, again, offering an opportunity to examine how wildfire has affected the land here. And then down here, you can see these small enclosures. They're wire mesh. They're part of Scott Stevens surveys. So these were where prescribed fire or mastication, fires at different time of the year, prescribed fires were done. So it's another one of those long-term historical data sets that now can be used to compare what happened with a particular treatment in the past and how did that affect the fire behavior at this point in the at this point in time. Okay. Now this one I'm moving back down to the very bottom of the center. So that last photo was way up at the top, kind of in the center top. Now we're way back down at the southern extremity, and here is an area that was prescribed burn. So you can see how different the effects were. You know, the CAL FIRE likes to do the prescribed burns in a time of year when there's less chance of it escaping, which means the fuel is more moist, the temperatures are lower, the flames are not as intense, so you have very different fire behavior and different effects on the seed bank. It's one of those things that, you know, if you can come out here this fall with our waived site fees, you can do some sampling of whatever aspect it is, you know, whether it's the fire intensity or the seed bank, or, you know, we have already had people come up and do some trapping of some small mammals to monitor the mammal population. There's a wide range of possibilities here. So again, thank you very much to IGIS for providing these drone 360 images. And we did just receive word that we have gotten an ANR opportunity grant, which is going to allow us to have IGIS do an extensive high-resolution 3D drone map in both red, green, blue, and near infrared of the entire burn area, with some flights over the unburnt areas as a control. So that will give us a very good visual map, you know, down to resolution of 1.5 to 4 inches, depending on which drone overflies which area. So that will give a lot of visual detail, but again, we don't have the staff time. We're lightly staffed to go out and do a lot of data collection here in the fall without the project. So just want to, again, make that pitch that it's this time-limited opportunity to make it up here, and we're trying to make it as easy and accessible as possible. So I'm going to take us back to the slideshow here. Those are the links. We'll have those in the webinar, or in the recorded webinar, so that if you want to view those in more detail later on, they are on the internet, and they are a active link, so you can take your leisure to examine those. So just wanted to call out some of the post-fire research opportunities that we've got here. You know, I mentioned that 3D drone map. We've also started to do outreach to current and previous researchers. And so there are, you know, outside of your own fields of study and whatever you would like to pursue, there are researchers out there who have said that they would be interested in collaborating on studies. And, you know, I'm sure to varying degrees, depending on what their workload is and what their ideas are. But, you know, Mary Firestone has mentioned that she has various ideas around studies that could be done on soil microbiology, but does not have the bandwidth and would love to work with some collaborators on that. Valerie Evener has done work here on seed banks and gopher activity over the years, and is interested in working with people on what different projects can be created and studied here on those topics, and a range of others as well. Travis Bean has done work here, has had current plots up through this last year on managing goat grass and other invasives in rangeland. And he's definitely interested in collaborating with people on new projects around the effects of wildfire and managing these goat grass invasives. Wildlife ecology is a broad topic. Currently, Justin Brashears is doing a lot of work here, particularly on the black-tailed deer. He has said that he would be open to collaborating and working with people. One of the interesting things, just as an aside, is that we have like 22 radio collared deer on site, and now we have the data about how they interacted to and reacted to the fire. So that's a really unanticipated side benefit of having had this fire, is this whole new range of observation and exploration that wasn't possible before. Luke McCulley, also from down in UC Berkeley, has reached out and would be very interested in doing some projects here and talking with people about collaborating. And in hydrology, our Sam Sandoval Solis, he's currently our RAC chair, is you know, has been active here on the site. We're working with him on setting up a couple of flumes. And David Lewis has also reached out. He has some flumes on site with historical data, and is going to be assessing those. But those are two people that you could potentially work with on hydrology. Ted Grantham is also another person who I haven't had a chance to reach out to, but who has been doing some hydrology work here. Bob Lane in ticks and tick-borne disease. I mean, he has an amazing, I think it's 48-year data set, and he's interested in restarting research, but he's also in retirement, and so would be willing to collaborate and share data. I mean, he's been a wonderful man to work with, and very open to collaboration. And then Scott Stevens has done extensive work here in fire ecology and behavior. He has those existing plots that I showed in the drone image up at the top, where he'd done prescribed fire treatments before. He's interested in coming up and renewing research and also working with other people. And then Colin Brooks, he's a former researcher here. He's now out of state, and being out of state, it would be way more expensive for him to do work here, because rates for UC people, as you'll see a little bit later in this presentation, are much more affordable than for non-UC. So, but he does a lot of post-fire erosion modeling, and has reached out to us and said, you know, I loved working at HREC. I would be happy to come back there and work with people and do things from afar. So those are a few names that I just wanted to call out as existing and previous researchers who are open for collaboration. So I'll get to it a little bit more later, but we are having an event here on October 19th. And part of our intention with that event is to be able to set up conversations between various researchers to allow them to start these collaborations. However, October 19th is going to be late enough in the year that it's likely we would have had rains. So again, I'll encourage you that this is a limited time window before we get rains. Here in Northern California, they can start as early October, sometimes not till November or December, but you never know. So just want to call that to your attention. So now I'm going to move into what Hopland can do to support your research. And some of you who are familiar with the HREC will know a lot of these things, but for those of you who don't, I'm going to take you kind of through our range of supports for research. And again, this is part of the wonderful thing that the UC has done by investing in these centers, is that you may be at a remote location and just doing research, but we have a lot of support on site that we can be hands-on with a lot of experienced staff. So as Allison mentioned, historically, we have done a lot of research here on sheep and on rangeland management. We have a current flock of about 500 breeding ewes. They're mostly Targhee, but with some Dorset and some Monadale bred in. They've mostly been bred for meat production. They are range sheep, and they are all tracked with RFID tags. So we have solid individual records for each ewe, what treatments they've received, whether it's for parasites or for some injury, also, of their progeny. So we have a really good trail of who's been bred with who and what the genetics are. And because they are our research herd or flock, we can manipulate them around where we need to around grazing treatment. So that's been important to some of our researchers on site, like Travis Bean doing research on goat grass. It's been important to have that flexibility, and we can provide that here. This is our lambing barn. It's fully set up with corrals and chutes for whatever we need to do to sort our flock into different treatment groups. We do all of our lambing in the barn, which allows us to track the progeny, which is also important to a lot of research projects directed at sheep. And we also are able to do extension events. So, we do sheep shearing school and sheepdog trials. So if some of your research involves extension work, we can provide that in our barn or other sites on the property. This, I mentioned before, we have about 20 acres of irrigated ground. We have solid water rights on the Russian River. So for projects that involve irrigation, we have that availability. We have a 2-acre research vineyard. This is an example of a field day being done by our local cooperative extension agent, Glenn McGordy. The rest of the irrigated ground is open pasture with subclover that's used for raising our next group of breeding ewes. But has also been used in the past for all kinds of trials, whether it's been different types of pasture grasses or fertility treatments or orchard cropping systems. In the background, you can see in the middle background, there's our cork oak plot. And so this is one of multiple common gardens that we have on the site. These are cork oaks. Allison referenced, we also have a blue oak common garden, with the acorns having been gathered from known sites across California. And then we do have a conifer plot that did burn, so we're not sure what's going to survive in that. Another thing we offer, which can be very important for researchers, is we have warehouses where you can store your equipment. So you don't always have to be bringing it from your lab on campus to us and then taking it back. They're solid buildings, good structures, mostly rodent-proof. The other part is you can see 2 vehicles in the picture, a couple of trucks. We do offer vehicles, so that's one of the things that if you work with the RECs, you can come out to our site in your passenger vehicle and then use one of our 4-wheel drives to get out on the site. We also have ATVs and side-by-sides, which allow access to our really rugged terrain in all types of weather for whatever type of research you'd like to do. Another thing that we offer at the REC here is we have extensive fabrication abilities. So we have a welding and a machine shop with a lathe. We have, that's in the upper left. And then in the upper right, that's our mechanic shop. We're a full service shop, can do anything we need to on vehicles. Do a lot of alterations as needed. And in the bottom here, you'll see this our wood shop. Outside of the wood shop, we also have people on staff who are skilled in electrical and plumbing work. So one of the great assets that we have is our staff. There's really deep and broad knowledge across the group here. We have people who can work with you on community outreach and extension around your research. We have a very experienced shepherd and who is, very well versed in rangeland management and sheep here in the North Coast. And then we've got a crew that can do mechanics, electrical, plumbing, anything that you need. So, this is an example of some of the work that we've done. This is where we constructed rainout shelters for Mary Firestone's experiment that are covering plots that have a impermeable barrier around them so that we're not getting outside moisture into the plots. We constructed a shed for her with all of her electronic equipment for monitoring carbon cycling in the soil. We constructed a precision watering system to apply exact amounts of water to each individual plot. And as Mary says, HREC staff have worked with us every step of the way in the design and implementation of our project. We could not possibly have done this work without the expert support that we have received from the HREC people. This is another one of our research facilities. It's one of the largest lysimeters on the West Coast. It was just reconstructed in the, I think around 2008, 2009, with help from Valerie Evener. And so I'm going to read a quote from her. Of the many research sites I've worked at, Hopland is by far the best. I've had many projects that have been far broader in scope, more ambitious, and executed to the highest level because of all of HREC's support. This is because of their long-term wisdom and insights into the ecology of their site, long-term manipulations and projects, their dedication to supporting high-quality research, their great facilities, great support, and a high diversity of ecosystem types. We also offer a greenhouse for propagation or other experiments. It does have temperature control equipment, some of which is, needs a little bit of maintenance, but is totally available for use. We also have a field lab, which you see here in the photograph. We have a full lab, which is under renovation, which should be available in the spring of 2019. And we can give you more updates as we move through that renovation. But we already have the contractor and the construction documents and are ready to start that renovation, have it done spring of 2019. We also have, not in this photo, a couple of drying ovens, which are very important for vegetation work. They're very large. So, we are 2 hours from Davis and Berkeley. So one of the things that's important and that we offer is a variety of accommodations, starting with our dormitory, which has 16 beds. There's a male room, a female room, a common kitchen area, and shower facilities. This is something that is really good for if you're bringing a group out. Can also be if you wanted to do a field class. So that's something that we would love to entertain if you're interested in bringing field classes here. These are for researchers. They're currently $15 a night, so it's a very low price. Allows for easy accommodation. Then we also do offer some more private accommodations. So in the upper right, we have a 1-bedroom, 1-bath cottage, full kitchen, fully furnished. And then in the lower left, we have our 4-bedroom, 3-bath ranch house. That ranch house needs a little bit of maintenance, but it's fully usable. I mean, we've been leasing it out to a research group, and they've really enjoyed it. I mean, it really fits with kind of the rustic atmosphere up here. And both of those are really affordable. I mean, we're doing it just on a cost basis, not earning any money, so way more affordable than a motel. And one of the things that we also have here is Shippey Hall. This is a building that was just constructed in 2012. If you look at the picture on the upper left, that shows our main foyer entrance area in the center, and then the left-hand side is a conference room with capacity of 220 people. There's also a catering kitchen attached to that. And then kind of the right-hand part that's a little more hidden by the trees, we have a museum with an extensive collection of species collected here on the site, along with an herbarium. And then that field lab that you saw earlier is also on the right-hand wing of the building, a little bit out of view. Here's the interior view. So it's a very nicely built building. It's got full audio visual equipment. You can see the projector in the back there. We just recently installed fiber optics throughout the headquarters area, and so we've got very high-speed internet connections allowing for video conferencing. Also, we have Wi-Fi access throughout the center here, and we do have multiple cell towers on site, which also allows for very strong cell service. So if you're looking for, remote sensing equipment and being able to connect that into your lab, we can do that fairly easily, both through cell and through a fiber optic connection. With this 220 seat capacity, we're well set up if you want to have events here, if you would like to do a departmental retreat, if you want to have a workshop in your area of expertise, we're fully set up to accommodate that. So we'd love to talk with you about any questions you have around our Shippey Hall facility. All right, this is for those all you scientists out there who love your data. We have this vault that's got 60 years of data from the site in all types of media. We've got paper files, we've got raw data, journals, we've got completed reports, microfiche, video, floppy disks, hard disks, digital archives. We have an extensive archive in our server. We also have an annotated bibliography of all of the projects that have been here since before 2001 completed, and we're working with the previous center director on the annotated bibliography for the last 17 years, which is partially completed, and we can give you access to what we have so far. So that was kind of the overview of what we offer here. Now I just want to note for you who aren't familiar with it, the process for having a project here. So, this fall we're allowing you to come out and do initial observations without having a project. But once you want to move forward after the end of this year with a project, you need to develop your project proposal, and then you submit it to our universal review system, which is an online system where, there's forms to take you through what facilities, what land, what labor you're going to require. And then that goes to our Research Advisory Committee, our RAC, who then reviews it for scientific merit and a fit with our capacities here at HREC. The official RAC meeting is in April of every year. So if you can get your requests in the first couple of months of the year, that's the best timing, because then we can have it officially approved by the RAC before the fiscal year starts in July 1. But we do accept off-cycle requests at any time. So we're not limited to that April date. Please feel free to talk with us. We can help you through this process. And once you have gone through that RAC process, if everything works, then they approve. They send you an acceptance letter, which outlines the terms. And when you are awarded the project, you can request staff hours. You don't have to if you're going to do all the labor, but there is a project fee, which we'll get to in a minute, which covers the use of all the roads, our water system, fiber optic, Wi-Fi, warehouses, lab space, vehicle usage. So there's a broad range of the facilities that you get. So this is our current fiscal year 2018-19 project fees. And as you'll see, A&R is heavily subsidizing these costs. These costs do not include any of the admin overhead for running the site. So A&R is fully footing that bill. And then this project rate cost comes from maintaining the 5,300 acres and all the roads and the research facilities. And that would come to $6,800 roughly per project, but we're again further subsidizing that. So for a year-long project here, it would be $1,370. And that's if you're a UC researcher or a co-PI. You don't have to be the lead PI, but you have to have somebody from the UC to get that subsidized rate. And then our hourly rate is for staff time, and this is only if you request it. It's $26.41 an hour, and again, that's subsidized by A&R down to half of the actual cost. So it's a fairly good deal. We're covering all the admin overhead. We're covering 80% of the project rate, and we're covering 50% of the hourly rate to make it more affordable. And for $26 an hour, our staff can do everything listed there. previously in terms of fabrication and sampling and data collection that you need. Animal care rate, we do have our flock here, and right now we are fully subsidizing that, so there's no cost to use our sheep. However, I will mention that there are serious budgetary concerns around the sheep and potential talk of really changing our animal program here. So if you do want to use our sheep and plan to use them going forward in the future, please submit your projects ASAP, because that's going to factor into budgetary decisions which will be made before the HREC meeting in April. So if you have further questions about that, I'm happy to talk those over with you. And then, this last year, our rates did jump dramatically, but we are working to stabilize those. So, as best as we can project now, our rates for this next fiscal year are expected to increase by less than 10%, more like 5%, so that for planning forward in your funding and budgets, you kind of have a stable picture. Oh, and those sites are on our those fees are on our website. So here's our timeline coming up. No fees for site visits until December 31st. However, we don't want you to do a whole project here without paying our site fee, because that's part of what funds us to be stable into the future. So we're allowing no more than 3 site visits unless you develop an active project. Then we are having a field day on October 19th. This would not count against your 3 site visits because there's not a lot of time in that day for sampling, but we'll have presentations, tours, small group brainstorming, and then accommodations available. They are first come, first served, so if you book early and you request an accommodation, you're more likely to get a private room or semi-private room in a smaller house as opposed to being put in the dorm. So then also we planned it around a time when there are local events the next day, and we'll also be looking at having a hike here on the center on the 20th. So, for those of you who are coming from further away, if you want to stay a second night on Saturday night and make a full weekend of it, we're really trying to make it as appealing as possible to those of you who are further away. And then just to give you a heads up on the, we are having a harvest celebration fundraiser on November 10th, which is coincides with our annual sheepdog trials, November 9th through 11th. So that can be a great time to come up. And then January 1st, 2019, normal fee schedules resume. All right, this is my closing slide. We're 3 minutes into question and answer period. I'm able to go past 11, so I'll do my best to get through these questions. And then, if you have to jump off at 11, please do so, and then we'll keep recording so that you can see the answers afterwards. And this is just showing you, life is already recovering. This little oak is taking best advantage of the opportunity to fire to jump in there quick and get ahead of other things that are happening. So I would encourage you all to be like that too and jump in and take advantage of this opportunity here. It's an important chance to do research that can really help California in the coming decades as we grapple with the effects of wildfires on our land and how to recover from them. So now I'm going to move into questions that are being handed to me by the questions you put on the chat. So let's see. Is there vernal pool distribution aerial data? So we do have a GIS layer that shows the location of all of the vernal pools on the site. We also have, it must be upwards of 15 different springs on the site as well. So we have a GIS layer that shows all of those. Let's see. The next question is there also an opportunity to study resilience, mental health, and human denizens and workers impacted by the fires? Well, maybe, but we weren't too affected here. I mean, 3,000 acres of property burnt, but no houses were burnt. Nobody lost their jobs. We didn't lose any livestock. So that's probably something that is a little more applicable to what happened last year with the Redwood Valley fire. And we do have a local nonprofit that has connections to those people who suffered in that fire that we could point you to if you want to study that. And then you could reach out to fire survivors who were more affected. Let's see, what is the name of the lab working on soil microbial ecology post-fire? That's the Mary Firestone lab out of UC Berkeley. I also have a note here that Eric Newman's lab are also interested in collaborating from the University of Arizona. And so that is one of those cases where, you know, it would be great to have a UC co-PI on that, because without that UC PI, the project rates are not subsidized. So, you know, it sounds like Eric Newman from University of Arizona is interested, and we'll work on connecting him to somebody in the UC system to enable him to work with you on our subsidized rates. Next question, are there any collared coyotes? We don't have collared coyotes. We have those 22, I believe, Allison, black-tailed deer, but we are working on a project of collaring coyotes and also on mountain lions. Justin Brashear's lab would have more details. He's working on finalizing the permits for the collaring of the coyotes for sometime in November here. And then he has already obtained all of the permits for collaring mountain lions. So that's something that we're actively working on, and hopefully for both of those species, we'll have colored specimens by the end of this year. I also have a note saying, this is from Justin Brashear's, to mention that our camera grid goes back to 2016 at 40 plus sites. So we do have wildlife camera data. And Justin, thank you very much for mentioning that, and also for being so willing to collaborate and share some of that data. That can be very valuable. And those 40 plus sites are spread all across the center. They're in the unburned areas, the prescribed burn areas, the burned areas. So you can really do a lot of comparison between those. Then there's a comment here. There's a potential for HREC to work with the Western section of Wildlife Society on medium-sized carnivore trapping. So that could be of interest to, you know, I mean, Brashear's is already working on that, but that's very interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. Let's see, is there any info on fox populations? What's that?
I would go back to the cameras on that for our fox populations. Like we mentioned, there are over 40 wildlife cameras that have been up, and we have lots of pre-fire data on that. Justin Brashear's lab has pre-fire data on that, and we were able to get, even the damaged cameras, we were able to get back up within days of the burn. So we should have pretty consistent and accurate data on animal movement and population before and after in the burned areas.
Great, great. Thank you, Allison. We do not have any collared foxes, just to clarify that. Then the next question, is there water quality data at the flume station? Any historical ash data or samples? So for water quality data at the flume stations, I think, you know, definitely in the way further back past, there's extensive data from these watershed 1 and 2 where they did clearing, and we do have 2 flume stations where we're working with Sam Sandoval Solis to reinstall flumes, but we don't have those yet. And then there is also a researcher, and I'm blanking on the name right now, I want to say David Lewis, but he has 3 flumes that are up on the property that have been active in the recent past, aren't active now, but he's looking at reactivating them. So that's the best I can tell you about that.
I'm just going to jump in here and say Ken Tate and Randy Dahlgren's studies involve water quality, so we do have past data on that.
Great, great. And then any historical ash data or samples? My best estimate on that would be Lindsay Hendricks Franco just did some recent prescribed burns up in the Chaparral area. Scott Stevens also did a lot of burns in the past, so those would be previous PIs here who you could reach out to see what kind of data they did collect. And sorry, I've only been in here for like a year and a half, so I don't have a great historical picture, but we do have a lot of researchers who are willing to collaborate. So those are 2 I would point out to reach out to.
I would also recommend going to that bibliography. We do have a list of fire-related studies that I think Hannah posted before, but should be on our website. And to go through those studies and see which particular ones you're interested in and who the researchers were, and we can help you get a hold of them.
Great, great. Let's see. Then how difficult is it to ship equipment to HREC, specifically phenology cams and weather stations? This might be useful for multiple projects. You know, it's fairly easy. We do have daily UPS and FedEx people coming up here. We also have a multiple forklifts, so if you need to get something shipped on a truckload, on a pallet, we're able to offload that without having the additional cost of having a liftgate truck up here. So it's fairly easy. And then also we do make occasional trips over to Davis, and we have a flatbed truck and car trailer that we could potentially bring equipment back from the Davis area for a much easier, less expensive option. Just to note for people, it is 11 o'clock. I'm going to keep working on finishing up these questions and any more that come in, but we're getting close. What kind of side-by-sides do you have at HREC? What would it take to outfit one of these with equipment to perform research herbicide application? So we have two Yamaha Vikings on site currently, which are a 3-seater version with a pickup bed in the back. One of those is leased to the Brashears group, so we're only able to really use it if they're not using it. But the other one is totally functional, and it does have I would guess, a 3-foot long bed on it. It also has towing capacity, and we do have a tow-behind spray rig. So it's got both boom and a wand with a 75-foot hose on it. So we do have an herbicide application method here that is very all-terrain. I mean, we did some invasive control on Klamath weed earlier this year, and it was amazing how many different places we could take that rig. So that's very usable. And then we are looking at getting another UTV, which would be a 6-seater Kawasaki Mule, which would also have a little bed on the back. But those are the main ones. We also have 2 ATVs, I think, and we've got a 3rd ATV currently that's got a spray rig on it. So we do have a quad spray rig as well for getting into a little bit narrower places than the side-by-sides will fit. So let's see, that's all I have handed to me in terms of questions. I'm gonna go check in here and see any more recent questions coming through. Let's see. Okay, a question is there, if we didn't sign up for the in-person visit, is there still room? Is it possible to sign up? Yes, we're totally open for signups, whether you want to come here to the October 19th event or come to a field day, or come and do your own field exploration on a different day. We're open for either one of those. And again, having a range of accommodations, we should be able to fit. Let's see, we can probably fit 25, 30, maybe 30 people here on site. So the first 30 people can have accommodations here, and then after that, there's motels not that far away. Okay, then I've got another question here. What are the potential changes in the sheep program? Well, there's a potential that we would be downsizing the flock to 250 ewes or 100 ewes. There's even the potential that we may be eliminating the UC-owned flock and going to a private lease. So we have a stakeholder meeting happening in October where we've invited various people from UC-A&R and from outside groups in industry and producers to come and give us feedback. But basically, we don't have direct research on the sheep now. With all the budget cuts that A&R is facing, it's a program that's under serious risk. So unless we see dramatically increased research directly using the sheep and or sponsorships from industry, there's a potential for some dramatic changes as early as April or May of next year. And probably the decision making is going to happen in November or December likely. So really for any projects that involve sheep, now is the time to get those in. Let's see. I'm looking through. Okay, got that one about the sheep changes. Okay, Lawrence Berkeley Lab. Can I be part of a UCPI? Yes. So the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab is considered part of the UC system, so you can be considered a UCPI.
I just wanted to jump in here also and say, if you are someone that's interested in collaborating, feel free to put your name and contact information and potentially your area of interest if you're not coming to the October 19th field day, or if you'd like us to contact you before, and we can sort of help group people together and get you in touch with other people with similar interests.
Great.
And go ahead and just type that into the chat. You can email John Bailey outside, but we're happy to take that information right now.
So I did get one of those come through, that Allison Neal from Norwich University in Vermont, part of a long-term research project on Plasmodium mexicanum, lizard malaria, with Ann Vardo-Zalek from Penn State. We're happy to chat and collaborate with if anyone is interested in long-term data from this system. Her email address is aneal1@norwich.edu. Then there is a previous research project here conducted by the Marylander Lab in 2003 entitled Detecting Predator Scat Towards Determining Impacts of Invasive Red Fox Populations on Native Canids in Northern California. So there is a project that was previously done here that has some data around fox populations. Then there's an email from, I'm sorry if I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Xiaoli Dong, assistant professor at UC Davis, interested in watershed science and hydrology, ecosystem modeling, and vegetation spatial patterning. I'm thinking what we'll probably do is we'll send out an email to the list of people who attended this, of the contacts of people who are interested in collaborating on research projects here. Let's see, Hannah Bird, I guess she posted the link that we are doing a fundraiser to support our recovery efforts, and there is a link in the chat thread of the link to go to. Then Travis Bean puts that he's interested in any projects with an invasive plant or restoration component. And those are all of the questions and chat comments that we've gotten so far. So we're at 11:07. I think we did fairly well. You know, just to let everybody know, and I'll type this message in. So, oops, unless I messed up the whole thing right now. No, okay. And then a couple more came through that Nicholas Dove is interested at PhD student at UC Merced is interested in soil microbial ecology and iterative effects of multiple fires. And then Justin Brashears says, open to any collaborations and happy to share what we have for collaborative projects. Thank you very much, Justin. We really appreciate that. And then I'm just going to type in my email address and phone number in case you want to follow up with any questions here. Hopefully I'm not opening myself up to a crazy flood, but okay, that should appear now. You can find us on the website too, but I think we're at the end of this presentation. We've answered all the questions that have come through, but again, I'm happy to chat with anybody about further questions that you've got in detail, and then we'll follow up with an email out to all of you who participated in this that we, who's interested in collaboration, with a link to the webinar, with a link to the annotated bibliography and our website and our donate campaign. And then just, again, thank you very much for your interest. And I really do want to encourage anybody here to reach out to us with any questions, try to make it up to our site this fall. And I'll look forward to talking with you. Thank you very much.